So our first session, revision week 1, is on medieval medicine. And we're going to start off by thinking about what did people think caused disease and illness in medieval times. When we're talking about medieval times, we're talking about the time period 1250 to 1500. So we're thinking right now, what did people think caused diseases? The first one, which I'm hoping popped into your head straight away, is they thought that diseases were caused by God. And basically this idea that God made them ill because he was either not happy with them or testing them. If people were poorly, it is because it came from God. The second one is astrology, superstition, the planets and the stars. Third one is the four humours. And fourth one is this idea of miasma, bad air. So let's start off by having a think about the church. Now, God made people ill because he was punishing them. So this is the core idea of what the church taught. And we need to know that the church did have a lot of power, a lot of control. It wasn't bad, but at that time, that's what people believed. That's everything they believed. So the church had a lot of control over people's ideas. So the church was the centre of learning. So people couldn't read or write, so any messages or education would come from the church. It set up and ran the universities. So that means the doctors that were going and training and the new ideas, that again, it came back to what the church taught and believed. They were in charge of books in the university library, and because the books were handwritten, they were handwritten by monks. The church discouraged dissection, so that's the cutting up of bodies. Now we know that dissection really does move on knowledge, but that wasn't happening at the time. And they approved the ideas of Galen as it fitted Christian beliefs. So basically, the church taught that the reason why people got ill was because God was punishing them. The church controlled people's ideas. It ran the universities. It took charge of books, and it discouraged dissection. So new ideas weren't getting through, and people didn't want new ideas. They wanted to go with what they knew and what they believed in. So we need to think about how might that slow down medical progress. Another thing that the church taught was that people should follow Jesus's example and care for the sick. So what we see is the church running hospitals, and they were mainly housed in monasteries. So the church hospitals were places of care, not cure, and they saw it as God's work to look after those that weren't very well. But they did not try to cure them because they didn't think that that was what they had to do. They just took good care of the people within the hospitals. Now, there were some rational explanations of disease. That means explanations that weren't due to God, they were due to the body. And the individuals we're talking about here is Hippocrates and Galen. So Hippocrates was an ancient Greek. He was alive a long time ago, and his ideas were still believed in medieval times. And he came up with loads of really good stuff, but his idea was that the diseases were caused by the four humours. This is the idea that your body is made up of bile, yellow bile, black bile, blood, and phlegm. And the reason why people got poorly is because you had too much of one of these in your body. So therefore, in order to be treated, you would try and balance out those humours. This idea was built on by Galen, who was a Roman, and he built on the idea of the four humours and came up with the theory of opposites. If you were feeling really cold, you had to get yourself hot. If you were feeling very hot, you had to cool yourself down. So again, this is building on the four humours, building on Hippocrates' work, but then coming up with these treatments that developed it further. So two individuals that people listened to and the church said were okay to listen to were Hippocrates and Galen, and the medieval doctors and ideas still centered around those. So when we're looking at medieval medicine, we need to think about how do people treat and prevent disease. So treatment is things that make people better, and prevention is things that people do to stop catching it in the first place. So how they treated or tried to prevent it depended on what people thought caused the disease. So, love this picture. The theory of the four humours. Remember, this is the idea that your body's made up of four different things, and if you've got too much of one, then it will make you poorly. So it makes sense. You've got too much blood, so you have to get rid of the blood. And this picture we see here is someone who is having bloodletting done. So basically, they're getting blood took out of them. We know that's not a good idea. We know that will make them feel really poorly. But bloodletting, that's one of the treatments widely used in medieval times. And the other thing that you might be doing is purging. So that's basically making yourself either sick from the mouth or sick from the bum. So purging, getting rid of things from the body, making yourself sick or making yourself have diarrhea. So these were common treatments in medieval times. Now, if people thought it was because of religion or supernatural, the treatments and prevention would be praying, fasting, that's not eating, pilgrimages, flagellation, that's where you whip yourself to say sorry for your sins, chanting, charms, being a good Christian, going to church, doing all those things. So many people thought, you don't need a treatment, you just need to be a really good Christian in order to get well. And this theory of miasma, bad air, again, treatment, prevention, purifying the air, making the air less smelly, sweet smelling herbs or stronger smells, cleaning the streets, burn things to make the air move, anything that kind of addresses this bad air in the sky. Now, if you did get poorly in medieval times, there were people you might go to try and get care or treatment. So the first one we've got there, the first picture, this is our barber surgeons. They had no training and they did basic surgery, including the bloodletting, and they were very cheap. So barber surgeons might be someone that you might go to get treatment of in medieval times. You would get most of your care in the home, and there would be wise women who would help with that, particularly childbirth, etc. They might use herbal treatments, but that was mainly about care in the home, and women that had like family kind of treatments and stuff that they would use to treat people. Apothecaries, they're like the chemists of today. They were trained, they made and mixed medicines. it cost money, but much cheaper than a physician, and you could go and get those medicines straight from the apothecary. The physicians would get their medicines that they were giving out from the apothecaries as well. And finally, you've got the physicians, medically trained at uni. They went to uni for 7 years. They were very expensive, so doctors were just for the rich. They would consult urine charts, zodiac charts. They would have a book called a vadicum, and they would not often treat patients. They would send their patients for treatment. So they might send them, for example, to the barber surgeon for bloodletting, etc. So in medieval times, you might get treatment from the barber surgeon, the wise woman, the apothecary, and the physician. Now, in the medieval times, there was obviously lots of disease and lots of nasty stuff going around, but the case study of the medieval times is the Black Death, the plague, which hit medieval England from 1348 to 9. So people had no idea what actually caused it, but they went to their old faithfuls and thought that it was caused by God, punishment from God, astrology because of the positions of the planets, miasma, bad smell, the 4 humours. They also thought strangers and witches at some points as well, but they had no idea about what actually caused the Black Death. They thought it was God, astrology, miasma, 4 humours, strangers and witches. Now, to prevent it, they went with praying and fasting, clearing up rubbish, carrying herbs and spices that they could smell. And treatments, things like praying, holding bread against the buboes and then burying the bread in the ground, eating cool things, all of these wouldn't help. So the Black Death is the case study in the medieval time.